Now, let's delve deeper into how we can all foster that same spirit of inclusion. In our next session, we'll explore the evolving landscape of workplace culture with a focus on continuing the shift from diversity and inclusion to diversity, equity, and inclusion. This discussion will shed light on the critical differences and connections between these concepts, emphasizing why equity is essential for creating a truly inclusive environment. Joining us is a fantastic panel of experts who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to this topic. They will share insights into how organizations can move beyond surface level diversity and implement equitable practices that ensure all employees have access to the same opportunities and resources. Our panelists will discuss strategies for addressing systemic barriers, fostering an inclusive culture, and measuring the impact of DE&I initiatives. Get ready to gain valuable perspectives and practical advice on embedding equity into your own DE&I efforts to create a more inclusive and thriving workplace for everyone. Our first panelist for this discussion is Mr. Robin Jones, a seasoned executive coach with 25 years in global financial services. He's held COO roles in 7 different markets, specializing in the Middle East. Robin excels in operational transformation, risk management, and digital innovation. Now an executive coach, he's ready to leverage his experience to boost your career. Off the clock, Robin's an avid hiker who's trekked across the UK, Africa, China, and India. He's always ready to tackle new heights, both in the boardroom and on the trail. Next up, we have Ms. Aga Sutka, a field coach trainer and ACC, who excels in coaching colleagues, partnering with managers, and driving personal and professional growth. Her credentials include an ACC from the International Coaching Federation, an advanced diploma from City and Guilds, and certifications from Quantum, Human Resource Consultancy, and ILM. Passionate about people development and sports, Aga qualified for the Ironman, albeit Iron Woman, 70.3 World Championship in Utah in 2021. She's now on her way to becoming an accredited coach by the International Coaching Federation. Well, looks like Nilakshi enjoys a good panel discussion. This time she joins us not as a conquering hero, but as the ever-reliable senior director at the Next Milestone Technologies, and she'll be part of this panel discussion too. And last but not least, meet our moderator, Navanitha Bhattacharya. With 30 years of experience across multiple continents, she challenges oppressive status quo in racial, gender, economic, and social justice. Navanitha excels in anti-oppressive program design, forging inclusive partnerships, and simplifying complex issues. She has worked with UNICEF, UNDP, and many other NGOs. For Navanitha, the personal is political, the political is professional, and the professional is libertarian. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now dig deeper into the next and the final panel discussion. Over to you.
Welcome to the panel discussion, the final panel discussion of the day. And ours is called Continuing Shift from Diversity and Inclusion to Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. My name is Navanitha Bhattacharya, and I'll be moderating the panel over the next 45 odd minutes. All of us on this panel are from various parts of the world. I'm from Melbourne in Australia, Aiga from Riyadh, Nilakshi from Kolkata, and Robin from London. And we are in very different climate zones as well. I'm shivering until the time Robin asked me, "Are you really wearing that jacket?" I said, "All right, I won't." Apart from our diverse locations, I'm excited also because of the diverse lived experiences and capabilities in the panel today. Cancer survivor, adventure seekers, multiple times Ironman, Iron Woman, champ, banker turned coach, single mom doing the balancing act called life. Ooh, we are very lucky to be in this panel today. My aim is a simple one: to hold space along with the fabulous panelists and to have a bold and a badass conversation on DEI. And in preparing for this session, I put a call out on LinkedIn last week, asking folks what they would like to hear. What does not get talked about? Some responded to my post. Many wrote to me privately. A common theme from people's comments and messages was the need for DEI conversations and actions to move from the superficial pink and blue cupcakes and glossy pictures of black and brown humans on brochures and every branding material possible, to actions that are dismantling oppressive status quo in workplaces. In a world more interconnected and globalized than ever before, and also more unequal and volatile. I'm talking about genocide being live streamed on every device that we have. How much more volatile can we talk about, right? So in a world so interconnected and volatile, globalized and unequal, employees, shareholders, communities are demanding loudly an end to oppressive policies and practices, end to oppressive structures and systems. Adding to this is the fact that we are currently witnessing the largest global youth population ever. Young people who are demanding equal access to opportunities and social justice, and young people who are not shying away from calling brands out for performative activism. How wonderful is that? So in this panel, time permitting, I'm going to moderate a discussion broadly around 4 key themes: accountability and status quo, representation and voice, coaches and coaching, because we have some fabulous coaches on the panel, and finally, care and refueling. All of you listening in, I invite you to please engage. Use the chat function to share where you are listening in from. Do share your perspectives, your experiences, your angst, your victories, your frustrations, and your celebrations. Do engage, please. All right, moving on. Let us welcome our panelists and get started with the conversation. Aiga, I'll start off with you. Briefly, please, can you tell us who are you?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Navita. So I'm a business and life coach and also a trainer. So I'm currently working for a luxury brand. So I have experience from high street, luxury brand management and learning development. And I've been really not recently, for many years now, pursuing coaching. And that's one of my passions, as well as my other passion is the sport that I do. And so, yeah, that's briefly about me. So, and I'm going to give word to Robin to introduce himself.
Thank you, Aiga.
So Robin Jones, good to meet everybody. So I spent my entire career in global banking. I lived and worked in 9 different countries, primarily in chief operating officer roles. After that 35 years, I decided on a change of direction. So I've recently become an executive coach. And for me now, it's all about sort of giving back all of that experience to the next generation. In terms of passions, I have 2 wonderful daughters. I hike all around the world, and I'm currently doing a history degree, would you believe? So, and in those first few months of doing that degree, I've learned, how much you can learn from history. And I think today, having been a COO, I'll try and give a very practical application to a lot of the questions that we're going to discuss.
Fantastic. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
All right.
That leaves us with me. So I'm Nilakshi Mukherjee, primarily in the HR and L&D space for the last 20 odd years. The first 5 years, so that makes it 25 really. So the first 5 years has been in the space of hospitality in various countries, various cultures, and various kinds of people. And we'll talk about that more later. Passion, oh, my children, have they turned into my passion? I'm not really sure. But then, yes, part of it, yes. And apart from that, I have found a newfound passion. Well, via my work, I started doing a lot of research on ESG and sustainability. And I'm appalled to learn where we are and what we've done to ourselves. And that's something I've started feeling very passionately about, have done nothing about it yet, but I'm just in the space of exploring and understanding how bad it is. And I think that's something which I'm going to be following very aggressively over the next left years of my life. So that's in short about me.
Fantastic. Shukriya, Nilakshi. And since you have your mic on, perhaps I can move us going by asking you the first question, if that's all right. Okay. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. DIB, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. D&I, diversity and inclusion. JD, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. Whatever we choose to call it, DEI at present, and that's a fact which research is consistently bringing out, does not create the impact it promises. Nilakshi, is DEI dying?
All right. Interesting question, and thank you for that, especially when it comes to an HR professional, right? So is DEI dying or is DEI dead in some parts? Yes and no. So I'll address the yes first, and then I'll come to the no, and we can have a little tug of war there. Yes, where? Yes, the corporate bubble has died. And the reason I call it a bubble is because it looked more like a PR machinery, which a lot of corporates were riding on. There was a lot of talk, a lot of gloss, a lot of fanfare, a bit of work as well. I wouldn't be entirely dismissing what was going on with it. Having said so, has the bubble burst? Yes, it has. The pandemic told us that we need to work remotely. So we said, okay, let's be inclusive. Let's get everybody going. And we started employing CDOs. I had never heard of it till then, till very recently, right? Chief Diversity Officers. The minute you bring in Chief Diversity Officers, so that's where you're ostracizing the ones you want to include. And I found that pretty invasive to me if I have to be kind of governed by a Chief Diversity Officer. I found the very concept not aligned to the concept of inclusiveness. And I'll tell you why I'm saying that, because the minute you make it non-communal, the minute you make it away from the mainstream by giving it a title, I think part of it is already lost. And that is where part of the corporates have already lost the game. However, I said there is a yes and a no, right? And I'll tell you where the no comes from. I'll give you a quick instance, which I encountered a couple of days back. And this I'm talking about not an urban, not a semi-urban, but a rural part of India. Okay, and so a lot of our mining industry is in the rurals. It's not in a semi-urban setup, it's in the rural setup. And I was exposed to an organization in the mining space in India where they have hired about 13%. And mind you, when I say rural in India, it comes with a lot of commotion, for the lack of a better word. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Comes with a lot of biases. It comes with a lot of commotion. DEI is not something people are happy to talk about, or even sort of be belonging to as a concept. And I was happy to figure out that this mining organization has 17%. Okay, 17% LGBTQ. Now, while the number is a statistic, it is about, when I look at the actual numbers and how they are working in harmony. I spoke to a couple of them, and that was not out of an objective. I didn't even know this be happening, but as a part of the process for what we were doing for them. And I was further surprised to hear that they were a happy lot. They were not being called out. There were no banters. There was absolutely nothing. They didn't feel that they needed to be called out separately into any formative imagination of the organization or the people around. So that's why I say a no as well, Navneeta, Robin, and Aga. But the yes is far more pronounced than the no. And I would love to hear from others about when I say a strong yes about the bubble being burst.
Fantastic.
Yeah, let me
opening. Yes, Robin, sorry.
Yeah, maybe let me add a perspective, and this is one drawn over, let's say, quite a long career. I don't think it's burst. I think it's changed significantly. If I compare to when I started in banking, wow, it was very different to how it is today. But I think, like many things, it has to be constantly re-energized and redirected. So no, I don't think it's burst at all. I think it's becoming slightly more mainstream, and certainly in the workplace, it's absolutely in people's consciousness now in a way that it never was 4 or 5 years ago. But I think people need to be patient. And I think one of the practical challenges I always used to have was you have to have good candidates. And there's always this impatience to have senior leadership representatives, but they have to be capable. They have to have the right capabilities, and often that does take a bit of time to get those candidates qualified, because you don't want to set them up to fail.
Mm-hmm. And there's so many points you raised there on, the thing on meritocracy. And discussions around meritocracy and how meritocracy remains a trap for many minoritized and marginalized groups in multi-ethnic workplaces cannot be overlooked. Aiga, do you have anything to add to this, to these diverse perspectives? And I'm loving the discussion so far.
Absolutely. So I'm living a country. I'm actually living in UAE, so United Arab Emirates. And obviously the diversity of people, cultures, nationalities, it's very broad. So you can meet every day somebody. So recently I joined a new company as well. And I was really surprised the way the mindset of the company to be equal and diverse in the same time. And I think that comes from the top. So they're really, really conscious, and the leadership is all about inclusion, and which is really, really great to see, and being as diverse as we can. And in what they do in terms of also recruiting, they make sure that we have equal amount of males and females working in the company. And I think it's beautiful to see that. And I really honestly believe that it comes from the leadership itself, the owners of the company, the CEOs, and that's the vision, and everyone will embrace it then.
Shukriya, a few different points emerged so far. Bubbles cracked, bubbles not cracked. Patience is required, constant re-energizing people, and the fact that, Robin, you said DEI has been mainstreamed, and you also put out the word on good people in leadership position, and that brings me to the whole big domain of meritocracy. Let's park the meritocracy discussion a bit aside, and I would like to see if it comes out organically or not. If not, we'll bring it up. But want to push us a little more on accountability, because accountability remains a critical factor on impactful DEI, right? Because here we are talking about equity. Equity means closing gaps for those purposefully marginalized or purposefully minoritized in the workplace. So if equity is what diversity and inclusion efforts and actions should be, the fact remains that DEI progress is more often claimed by power holders. Here we have Robin, who has been in senior leadership positions for several decades, who is talking from that leader perspective, right? And research constantly shows that DEI progress is more often claimed by power holders or leaders in organizations, not so much by all employees. Employee experience of exclusion in workplaces continue. You just need to scroll through LinkedIn, for instance, on any day to understand the depth and volume of evidence out there. Discrimination continues to happen in workplaces. Pay equity remains, pay inequity remains a fact even in 2024. Ethnicity, pay equity is not even considered. People with diverse disabilities are finding it that much more challenging to enter the workplaces if they're entering, challenging to kind of climb the ladder. Organizational policies and processes are still being designed to keep the status quo going. Workplace bullying and other bad behaviors continue to persist. Many DEI initiatives are surface level and seldom addressing the systemic issues, the structural issues. I am in a country, in Australia, where largely organizations, the leadership and governing board still remains predominantly white. And this is a multicultural, multi-ethnic country, a country where the sovereignty of Aboriginal people has not been ceded, right? So my question to you all is, which DEI practice or set of actions have you seen moving the needle on structural equity? Not the surface level, not the celebration of religious days, cultural days, but structurally equity has been achieved. Which DEI practice or actions have you seen moving the needle? Which actions have shifted the status quo? If you are able to speak through, organizations where you have seen it happen, and if it's sustained, please share.
Is it for anyone?
Yeah, I'll go first on that question. I think, and again, let me give a sort of senior leader perspective. At the end of the day, and as a COO, so at the end of the day, my responsibility every day was to make sure that the bank operated smoothly. That the ATMs were working, that the digital app was working. And believe me, nobody thanked me if those things ever stopped working. So ultimately, I had to surround myself with capable people, right? That's the core point. And we used to receive very clear balanced scorecards every year on the basis on which we were rewarded. And I always often found that a lot of the HR metrics, a lot of the diversity metrics were very much at the bottom of the scorecard, standard terms that were put into everybody's scorecard. And ultimately, I never felt that we were held to account for those targets as much as we were for some of the others: cost reduction, P&L increase, regional growth, etc. So I'm a big believer that you've got to hold people very accountable through metrics, through balanced scorecards, and for senior management to truly believe that they're going to be judged by those metrics at the end of the year. And it's not just a metric that when you have your appraisal at the end of the year, well, we didn't hit that target, but don't worry about it, right? People have got to be held truly accountable and have got to take sort of real action. That would be my first point.
Thank you, Robin. You talked about capabilities. Anyone wants to add on their perspective to this?
I would. I'm raring to go here when I hear Robin's part of the story, and most of it I agree to, actually, because as HR, one of my targets, I would say, or challenges. Targets is a different perspective. Challenges was ownership of these KPIs, right? And the ownership somehow seemed to lay with HR, where HR had got nothing to do with the direct productivity of the organization, otherwise via recruitment, etc. Yes, but via diversity hiring, let's say, right? Or via diversity engagement, getting them up the ladder, training them to take up different roles. So this ownership never lay with business, and which is why I mentioned, Robin, that it is a bubble which is on the way to burst or has burst, because I still don't find organizational leadership owning these KPIs in a systemic way, not via a Pride Month way, not via a June way, but a systemic way where they are going to be held accountable for those targets. And which is why I feel that there are certain organizations which are doing great work, and there's nothing taking away from them. And I can name a few right away, but then I think all of you know the names I'm going to be talking about, right? And there are a few in India as well in the hospitality sector doing great work, and they're committed to it. But that commitment is not in most of the organizations at a leadership level whom I've worked with or I have engaged with. And there is a distinct failure or not so much of a success when those KPIs are not getting owned at a leadership level. And that was precisely the point I was making.
Do you think people are senior leaders are sufficiently rewarded for taking perhaps some of the risks that they would need to take around certain candidates?
Are they done today? Maybe not. Should they be? If in case they are serious about DEI, if they're and okay, there's one more point here about meritocracy. It is not about whether they're capable, equally capable or not. It is about, do they have it in them to bring themselves up the ladder, and are we facilitating it enough? Somehow, so I'll start with women, and I'll not take more than a minute here, Navneeta. I know those flares. But when we talk about women, right, and when we talk about bringing them up in leadership roles, they're not in leadership roles without having the merit to them, right? They are there because they have the merit to them. But then why did it take us so long to bring them up the curve? Simply because there was no facilitation of the process happening. Typically in Indian countries and in a lot of European countries as well, I wouldn't restrict it to India, there is a natural regressive mindset that women have so much more to do at home that they would not be able to give us the hours. So let us not do it, let us see if we can go without it, unless there was a target pressure that, okay, leadership needs to have 10% of women. Do you agree with this or you not? Aga, Robin, we have seen an upsurge in women only when the targets have been set, but they were still meritorious even when the targets were not there.
Where I am from, we have equal rights for women or men, so we don't, separate. But obviously, coming to Middle East, you can sometimes feel like the president, if you're in a power position and you give a task, like it happened to me, if you're a manager and you give somebody, for instance, male, maybe Arab country or somewhere in Middle East region, they would look at you a little bit differently and they would not accept that. So I have experience on my own skin, when you learn to work it and gain that trust. And I notice quite a lot often being a manager and working with males predominantly from like Middle Eastern countries, but not everybody is again the same, where they wouldn't really kind of accept the woman would give them orders, if I may say so. But obviously this has changed as well, and it's also the mindset, how people being brought up, and also the country itself. So what I like about Middle East, that they're really open-minded, and there is diversity. There are so many women, local women, that they are in leadership roles, and that's really, really inspiring. And different companies work different ways, but the recent company I have joined, so I can see there is a lot of, they are a European company, but there's a lot of, emphasis on being equal for men and for women, which is fantastic, actually.
And there are two points which sits squarely on my head. One is how are capabilities being defined? Who defines it? The people who hold the most power in any organization continues to define what are appropriate capabilities, continues to define roles, and that entire value chain then gets impacted. So there was this research by Edward Chang, and I'll be happy to share the link with you all at some point. So the research by Chang highlights a very troubling trend on sameness. This is something which I have seen in every workplace, and I have lived in 16 different countries now and worked in many number of organizations. So the trend on sameness, which says that when leadership roles open up, the tendency is to fill these positions with people who look like their predecessors. So what it's perpetuating the sameness, and it kind of continues. This habit, without doubt, stifles diversity, more often than not overlooking people from marginalized and minoritized groups. That's the first point. The other point is you all talked about equality and equality between men and women. The fact of the matter is that men and women are not homogeneous groups, right? There are so many diverse intersecting variables that influences and impact anybody's access to the opportunities and how they kind of evolve, grow, and kind of move on from there. But on this issue, I would love to, take this a bit further. Given how, like I've seen talking about structural inequities again, right? Yeah, both Ega, Robin, Nilachi, you all talked about, you all are seeing more equality in workplaces now, yes, but structurally inequities remain for some groups of the population. There is no two ways about it. And within the structural inequities, there are many issues that are stubbornly not being even acknowledged by DEI work, right? And caste is one such example. Within the DEI context, caste still remains largely unaddressed. Why am I raising the issue of caste? Not just because there are two Indians here, but because almost every multi-ethnic, multicultural workplace across the globe have multi-caste humans working there, right? And it just like caste is seldom kind of talked about there. So, and this is not just in the Indian subcontinent, but like I said, across the globe. So organizations are shying away from addressing caste-based inequities. Conversations are very hush-hush. I tried to open up a conversation here on Facebook, trying to push for folks to, I wanted to understand if people are talking about caste, if Indians and Pakistanis and others in the diaspora here in Australia talk about caste in the workplaces. No, none. So given the urgency to address intersectional inequities experienced by employees and other stakeholders in the world of work, why is this still the case that even in 2024, that issues such as caste are unaddressed? Nilakshi, would you like to have a go with this? And then Robin and Ega maybe can add their perspectives.
Even before I sort of answer this question, I would want to understand from Robin and Ega, with your permission, Navneeta, that what is their spectrum of understanding when we say caste? Because only then will my answer resonate with them, else we'll be lost in the discussion.
Yeah, no, I'm reasonably familiar with the caste system in India, and in fact, on various trips to India, I've been quite shocked at the way that it's played out in certain situations. Someone who was very polite in the office, when I've gone to a restaurant with them, has treated someone presumably of a lower caste with complete disdain, which absolutely shocked me, to be honest. So I'm reasonably familiar with it, and it does have various similarities with the class system in the UK, by the way, in terms of the perception of the upper classes, private school, what university you've been to, etc., etc. That still plays out in the workplace for sure.
Yeah, which is why I asked, because if you're unfamiliar with the way it plays out, then the answer wouldn't make sense to you. Ega, any sense of what we mean when we say caste?
Honestly, not so much. I'm being very honest, because I haven't really come across this.
That's all right. I think we'll educate you a little bit more about how human beings can exist in this world without having an identity. That's even worse, actually. So yes, when we say caste in the Indian context, it is misunderstood, misinterpreted in various ways, because there are a few sections in the Indian society, right? One is the elitist section, which does not understand or does not want to acknowledge that this is a problem, and it exists in today's India. There is another section which is completely aligned to the thought process of having a caste system, and they swear by it, right? So those are two ends of the Indian societal spectrum that we're really dealing with. I was quite surprised when and there are particular regions in India which are a little more sensitive to this entire occurrence of the caste system, which exists predominantly across India, though. But I did not know initially, and I'll tell you a little story. I had no idea as to how you Bengalis, where I come from. While it still exists within us, but then we're not so sensitive about it, I would say, if I may say so. But there are certain other sections which are pretty much so. So once I was traveling to one of these places with an Indian, I'll not take names here, unnecessary biases and presumptions, but I was traveling to one of the places within India, not so far from West Bengal, and which is a predominantly caste-driven society. And I was doing this workshop where there were about 20 odd men from this place. And I was distinctly, and it was an offsite, so we were away for about 3 days from office, and it was going all well, and it was going fantastic. There was a lot of laughter, fun, learning, all of that was happening. But subtly, I was noticing that there were a couple of them within this group, right? About 2 or 3 men who were constantly at the beck and call and banter of the rest. And I was like wondering, is it just office banter? Is it just like they're younger than us? What is it? What is it that I'm missing? And these were and when we talk of microaggressions, these were, when I talk about it today, when I think about it today, these were clear cases of microaggressions which were absolutely acceptable by this group of men. Okay. And then I was talking to somebody outside of that region, and within that group, but this particular person was from some other place, though a domicile of that place. I was like, what is it with these boys? Why are they like always at the beck and call of the rest? And he was like, oh, you are not going to be talking about this here. Not now, maybe some other time. I was like, what is wrong? What is it that I'm missing out of the picture? So apparently they were the lower castes, obviously, which I understood, but which I couldn't figure out because I'm not too acclimatized to their names and their appearances, whatever else. And it is a given in that society, and this I'm talking about 2023, that if you belong to the lower caste, and even if you're working in the corporate environment, even if you are working at par with most of us, mind you, all of them were HODs. So merit wasn't a problem. They were all HODs. They were all doing well. But there were these 3 HODs who belonged to a different caste, and it was a natural instinct for the rest to treat them differently, so much so that it actually caught my attention. Now, this is just a story for you to ponder upon, that how caste is a form of vicious connotation in our country, which we are not aware of in most parts, and 2, which we refuse to talk about even today, and 3, it exists predominantly across the society. So that's my take on caste. Highly unaddressed, highly prevalent, and DEI conversations don't include caste, Navneeta. We don't talk about it.
Yeah, and Nilakshi, just for Robin and Aida, it's not just an Indian subcontinent issue. The reason I raised it here is because, and if you have not read that book, please do. Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. I think it came out 2 years ago. She's an American, Black American woman. And that book is absolutely brilliant, where she, in fact, traces the origins of caste and links it to oppressive systems and structures related to racism. right? And there was not too long ago, a report by the ILO on how in North Africa, Middle Eastern regions, caste remains a significant factor in workplace discrimination. But the point here is that when we are talking about DEI, it's the easy issue of women and men.
Women.
And now, thanks to a lot of advocacy and work that has happened, the broader rainbow world, LGBTQI+ and people with disabilities. But for us to be able to push our boundaries constantly on what constitutes DEI and who all are the gatekeepers of that. So advancing diversity requires disrupting. I know I'm using the status quo a lot, but that is what the work on DEI has to be, disrupting status quo of sameness, in order to ensure there is genuine diversity within workplaces. So my fourth question to you panelists is, what has to be done differently by organizations to attract, hire, and retain diverse talent?
Can I just make one final point on that disrupting the status quo, because it's a really important point, and then we draw another sort of analogy, and I'll raise it in the context of risk. So some organisations will encourage employees to take risk, and it will be accompanied with, we encourage you to take risk, and we accept sometimes if it doesn't work, then we accept that risk, right? But the reality is it doesn't play out that way. So you take the risk, it goes wrong, the company loses money or something doesn't happen, and then the witch hunt begins, right? So I think there's also this sort of element of, are organizations prepared to take a risk, make change, and really see it through, and then not penalize people if it doesn't then always work. And there is a difference. There is a difference. And I've seen that play out many, many times where you're kind of encouraged to take risks, it doesn't work out, and then all questions are asked, and somewhere down the line you get penalised. Right?
Excellent point, Ega and Nilakshi. Who all within the organization sets the tone for such a risk-taking culture and a non-penalizing culture?
Well, I think it initially starts with the board. I think it comes down through the HR committee, the ExCom, the risk committee.
Right up there.
Yeah, it's something that pervades right through the organization, but encourage people to make change, encourage people to take a risk, and actually reward them sometimes when it doesn't work, right? As opposed to penalize them.
No, absolutely. Ega, would you want to make a point here?
Yeah, I wanted to just add on it. So definitely comes from the top. I have seen on work different companies, obviously, and there is a company who really embraces people to make mistakes, but there are a company who would never accept you to make mistakes. You just need to follow whatever they say. And I remember one time I joined a company and they said, oh, well, you can be creative, but within the frame. So it happens because if people make mistakes, obviously the company will lose money, and they will not look in the same way. That the employee will be penalized for it. But there are companies who actually embrace making mistakes, because if you don't make mistakes, you don't actually learn. And people get scared to make decisions because they're like, oh my God, what they're going to do, because I've seen different scenarios.
True, and I read a recent post on LinkedIn, and my perimenopausal brain fog means I'm forgetting the name of the CEO who, when the pandemic started, took a 70% cut to his salary. Dan something, if you remember, if any of you. So he took a 70% cut.
The story, yeah.
To his salary to ensure that all his employees get that minimum 70,000 US dollars per year salary. So what is now, and everybody the world over, a lot of naysayers said, oh, you're an absolute fool, your company is making losses, and look, you're like ABCD. So today he's having the last laugh, where his company has seen a massive increase in profits because shareholders, communities, and the world at large trusts that here is a company which is humane. So how do we bring the humanity back in organizations? So you're right, leadership sets the tone there. Is there anything else you want to talk on?
Yeah, I had a question. I just wanted to pick on Robin a little. So Robin, when you say that we need to build a risk appetite, what is this risk appetite for? Who is the risk?
I think because I think there are some situations. So let me give an example. We had one of the banks I work for. We were trying to increase the number of females in the workplace in senior positions. And one of the ways that we absolutely went about that is we said, if we had two candidates, we would go for the female candidate.
Right.
Long as that female candidate was within 10 or 15% of the capabilities that were required, right? And that was a positive step we took. So we weren't going to go for female candidates who didn't have the capabilities, but if there's only a marginal difference, then we would go for it. And that actually did have an impact. But there is an element of risk in doing that, right? Because you are, in some cases, taking on a slightly less capable person initially, but in the belief that they will actually grow and sometimes actually surpass their male equivalent, right? So again, there is an element of risk there. And in a really pressurized environment that I worked in, taking that risk sometimes is very difficult because when things don't work, if you have some initial issues bringing new candidates in, people have very short memories. And then, let me give an example. If the mobile app blows up at 3 o'clock in the morning and customers can't get into it, nobody remembers diversity. Nobody says, "Okay, Robin, the system's down. We don't care. You've done a great job on diversity," right?
Okay, sorry if I'm being a nag, but I have a counter question.
Sorry.
No, but because I know I'm being a bit of a nag. But tell me, what if you would have chosen a man who would have been about 10 to 15% not out there, right? In a similar caliber. So it's not about he or she. It is about who is this person who can take up this position. And what if the man fails? Are you questioned on that?
Your question when anyone fails, right?
Exactly.
Anyone fails,
exactly. Yeah. So why do you need to develop a risk appetite for a woman and not for a man who might also fail?
Because the reality is in certain areas, and let me give you an example, IT, right? IT, and I was going to mention this, there are certain functions where the number of women is still very scarce. Women, so HR is the opposite. HR is dominated by women, isn't it? Right? If you go to any HR function, if you go into an IT department, it's absolutely the opposite. And therefore, when you want to elevate females in the IT space, sometimes there is a bit of a skill gap. Absolutely, but you have to take that risk and take that chance.
No, I totally read what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is that a risk?
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. It is considered a risk.
Is that a risk? Why are we framing it as a risk instead of an opportunity? Why are we having such a binary lens to what should be seen as upskilling broader groups of the population to ensure that development is being enjoyed by all in the same way and not just by the same groups of people?
No, I accept that, and I think opportunity is a great word. With my practical lens, the only point I'm making is that if there are issues in the short term and things don't work, you've got to have a leadership team that's patient, right? Because when things go wrong, things blow up, things maybe don't work as smooth as you want. People have very little patience, and people very quickly forget those broader, important initiatives that we're all trying to pursue.
Yep.
You know what? It's like an easy kill, Navneeta. It's an easy kill if this particular decision that you made was for a diverse group of population. It just becomes easy to pin the blame. It's just about that, and that is why the risk appetite diminishes with time. So I know exactly what you're saying, Robin. Being in HR, being a woman, I know exactly what you're saying. That's why I said.
Yeah, but then being a woman, being a leader, being a this, being a that, whatever position you are holding, a position of power and privilege, constantly asking yourselves how you are using your power and privilege to ensure that you're not recreating the same stereotypes, not playing into the same bias, not using the same prejudices to continue with the same narratives of dominant, these are dominant narratives, right? Which has continued over generations. Andy has poked me saying there are 3 more minutes left.
Yes.
I would love for you all, what would be your, given that change, humans don't like change. And that's why this sameness bias, that's why that comfort bias remains, right? And therefore, people like you and I, who are constantly questioning and changing disrupting status quo, we get bloody fatigued and really tired. What is your advice? One advice, practical, for DEI leaders and practitioners. How can they refuel and keep showing up in spite of toxicity and performative allyship and tokenism? One advice. Aiga?
Oh, it's a big question. So, I mean, I'm looking from my point of view as a coach, really. So, because I help people to develop. So, it really comes from the top, but what we can do within, it's just to help people. And my role as a coach is making sure that people feel great and motivated. And I think that's where your management needs to be really engaged with that as well. So, because otherwise, if people are down, I had before people crying to me, like in one day, there was one time 3 different employees were crying in coaching sessions because there's so much, toxicity in their workplace, and that's what they complain about. But it's really like the mindset of managers that and the feedback that you can give. So, and it's the feedback, and also my role is there to inspire and motivate people. But then it has to be alignment with managers, and this is where you go and give your feedback as well.
Thank you. Robin?
I think for me, don't make it ideological, make it practical, and align it to the strategic priorities of the business. That would be my.
Thank you. Nilakshi?
Be at it, be fearless. If you're a DI practitioner, if you are a diverse, marginalized, human being, if you feel so, stop feeling so and be fearless about your pursuits. There's no other way.
Shukriya, thank you. It is time. Unfortunately, I can have this discussion.
I know.
Just want to end by underlining that DEI work must, first and foremost, end unfairness and bias and discrimination and abuse and mistreatment of all kinds. That is one simple thing. And leaders, you all talked about KPIs, capabilities, leadership, etc. So holding leaders accountable, leaders holding themselves accountable, key. Thank you. Bahut shukriya for you fabulous people, Aiga, Robin, Nilakshi, for sharing with us parts of you and the work that you all are doing. Keep inspiring. Thank you.
Thanks for being such a lovely moderator. Really.
Yeah,
Thank
well
you.
done.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, that was an invigorating panel discussion indeed. We explored the evolving landscape of diversity, equity, and inclusion within corporations. So has the initial fervor faded, or has it re-emerged stronger and is it more mainstream? The consensus is clear. Leadership must take proactive steps to champion inclusion. Our panel offered diverse perspectives, shedding light on persistent issues such as discrimination and pay equity that continue to challenge workplaces. We critically examined systemic and structural barriers, underscoring the urgent need for decisive actions and transformative initiatives to propel meaningful progress. And as we conclude, there are profound insights to contemplate and transformative actions to pursue on our journey towards a more equitable future. Thank you once again to our panelists.